So 2020 has finally brought us something good. We've got the first episode of The Mandalorian Season 2, so let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your take on The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 1. This is a spoiler review. I'm going to be spoiling away inside of this video, so feel free to spoil away, give away specifics down below in the comment section. No spoiler warnings are required as we go into it. I'm not sure if I'm going to do week-to-week review recap videos like this one. If this one does well enough, I plan to. I'm going to play it by ear. I'm totally open to it if there's enough interest in me doing more of these. So in general about this episode, before I dive into specifics, I felt this episode had a lot of really good stuff that is everything that made me love Season 1 and excited about Season 1. There were a few things in there that had me a little bit worried about where things could be headed or some trends they might be drifting towards that might not be the best for the show or warning signs. But with that said, let's get started talking about the good. So right off the bat, this episode feels true to Season 1. And what I mean by that is that it doesn't feel like a reinvention of the show. It doesn't feel like they tried to reconfigure things. They know what kind of worked about Season 1, and this is another one of those little adventures for the Mandalorian to go on. And so the idea of that is that this show has always kind of been like a Western in the world of Star Wars. The episodes very frequently borrowed from the types, the formulas, the structures from old Westerns. So you have one where they're off with the shooter. You have the one where they kind of go on a heist. You have the one where the drifter has to help the village battle off bandits. And this feels like another quest that our cowboy is on with the Mandalorian. And this one, he's on a quest, but once again, has a bit of the helping the village, but a different kind of spin on it. And so it just feels like more of what we got in Season 1 in the good sense. I'm kind of a little bit torn on this show of, do I like that it's very episodic at times, or do I want it to be more one kind of continuing narrative where everything that happens ties into the grand story of the season? And I think I like that this show just kind of has this vibe of him as this drifter showing up in different places and helping people wherever he's at. If you think through like the movie series, the Mad Max, that's essentially what the movies have turned into. Mad Max is not really the lead of the story. He's this drifter that shows up in other people's stories and helps them on their journey. And that's what a lot of these Mandalorian stories kind of play like. And I think it's a really interesting way to do a show, especially at a point in time where every show goes hyper serialized, where every season of most TV shows on streaming plays like an 8-hour, a 10-hour movie. And this one, there is the arc that runs throughout the season, but then these stories feel kind of like one-offs. So you get to this episode and you have kind of that prologue where they go, he's trying to get information, and so goes to this boxing ring of sorts and takes out a bunch of guys to get information. It's a double cross. The guy actually wants to steal his armor, and he hunts Mandalorians. And so then, of course, Mando takes everybody out. And I'll pause right here. I really appreciated that because in Season 1, I rewatched it over the last few days, actually mostly just yesterday, and Mando gets beat up a lot. There's just a lot of context where he's not really coming out on top. Like, he doesn't die, obviously, but there's a lot of fights that he loses. And even as we were watching it, my wife says, I thought these guys were supposed to be great warriors. This guy loses a lot for a great warrior. So I really enjoyed that this season kicked off with him just destroying a room full of thugs that double-crossed him. He was prepared for it, and he won. But so then we get this information that there's some armor, he hears that there's a Mandalorian on Tatooine, so he goes there to find this Mandalorian on this quest that he's on. And as soon as we get to the village, we learn that basically this whole thing is a misdirect. that we're on another quest, another adventure for our hero, but it's not really going to tie into the grander narrative. We get there and immediately we discover this isn't a real Mandalorian. So whatever happens here is inconsequential to the quest to find more Mandalorians and inconsequential to the quest to discover where baby Yoda comes from. So for some people, that'll be frustrating. And I still have, I have to see where the season plays out to know how much this frustrates me. But in general, that's very true to what season 1 was like. There's a lot of things that happen that are an adventure for our hero, but that don't really give any answers to the main arc of the season. They don't really progress that journey at all. In this episode, essentially, did not progress our journey at all. Some people will be frustrated by that. And so but in general, I like that it's not super different from what we got before, from what worked before. Continuing on, we get to our planet here and we meet the lady, what was that, from episode 5 of the show once again, and she's in lively form, sends us off to our little village, and then kind of the first big reveal of the season, guy walks in Boba Fett armor, but he looks a little bit off. Takes his helmet off almost immediately, and it's Timothy Olyphant underneath the armor. We kind of knew this was the case. The rumors had told us that Timothy Olyphant was going to be wearing Boba Fett's armor, and so then we see that here. And I got to pause right here. I love the way that they cast these shows. The actors that they pull in are people that get me really excited for the show. It's not necessarily always the flashiest people, but they're the people that are interesting to me. Carl Weathers. I absolutely love the Rocky movies. I love Predator. And they get Carl Weathers for season 1. And then of all the people they could get to be Cara Dune, they get Gina Carano, which she's been around for a while, done quite a few things. But like in the first couple of years I was married, they did a revival of American Gladiators. And she was in it as Crush. And so back to the early years of my marriage, that was a show my wife and I watched. And she was clearly one of the big star breakout gladiators of the show. I mean, just very fun to watch. So she's been on my radar for over 10 years, or 10 years before she showed up on the show. And then they cast her in Star Wars. And then a lot of these other side parts, once again, interesting people like Bill Burr showing up. And here you get Timothy Olyphant, an actor I really enjoy. And if you know his career, he did this TV show called Justified that was basically a modern day Western. What is Mandalorian? A Star Wars age Western. So he's just really good in these types of roles. So him showing up and he has all of his kind of typical Timothy Olyphant swagger to him. Him playing a sheriff is great, but it's just a nice little touch that he has Boba Fett's armor on him as part of the way that he's doing all of this. So I just, as for like things that I specifically would get a real big kick out of, this would fall into all of that. And with where it ends, I would guess he's going to come back by the end of the season. They'll bring him back. That's what the show seems to do. He meets these different people, and then when he needs them, they join back up again. So hopefully he can come back in for some point in time, and maybe Mando will be like, here, you can use the armor one more time for this adventure. I thought that was a lot of fun. On his character, what I think they did really nicely with Timothy Olyphant's Sheriff Boba Fett character is that it's a real simple little character. He's just this guy in this mining village, and then they give a glimpse of what happened when Endor, the second Death Star, was destroyed. And everybody cheers like, yeah, stormtroopers are going to be gone. And then immediately the chaos takes over. Why is he the sheriff in this very classic Western type character? The guy that shows up in town and just has to become the sheriff. Why did that happen? Because of the Battle of Endor. This movie that my whole life I've been watching and enjoying had consequences. And we're seeing it in this episode, what that looked like for a group of people. And it wasn't all singing yub yub and celebrations, beating drums on the heads of stormtrooper helmets and fireworks from X-Wings. Chaos erupted throughout the galaxy because that was the government. That was the order that was keeping things in line. And there's been some speculation that maybe one of the things they might do throughout this show is explain where the First Order came from. One of many problems with the sequels is that they never really even explained what the First Order was or why it came to be. And even in this episode, with just this character's backstory, you can start to figure out why the First Order would come about, why there would be a bunch of people that would like, we need to bring that back. This is chaos. This isn't working. What can we do to bring order back to the galaxy? And so I just thought a real nice little way to tell a story about a character, but for us as Star Wars fans, fills out the universe quite a bit in a way that's helpful and to some extent improves the sequels, some very small extent. Moving right along, we see actually in his backstory, he shows up to town. He's running the people off. There's a really fun little Easter egg for Star Wars fans with the Boba Fett suit. So Boba Fett's always had this rocket on his back. And that actually goes back to before even Empire Strikes Back, to where they did the holiday special. And then there was actually a toy that you could order. And in the first advertisements for the toy for Boba Fett, they said that he could fire this rocket. And then when the toys came out, the rocket didn't fire because there were all these lawsuits. And so they got nervous. And so they just glued the rocket in. And so they never actually released Boba Fett with the firing rocket. And then Boba Fett doesn't fire the rocket in these movies. And so then him firing the rocket is actually the payoff to all like decades of Boba Fett jokes about this rocket that can't fire, even going into the toys. And so that's just a lot of fun to see them do something like that. And after all of this, we discover the big plot line for the season, that there's graboids from the Tremors franchise are actually on this planet. And so then we need to do something about that. So they team up, the village ends up teaming up with Tusken Raiders, which is fun. That's a nice little touch to have them team up with Tusken Raiders, because Tusken Raiders have always been the worst. All the way back to the original Star Wars, they're bonking Luke on the head, and Obi-Wan's got to show up to save the day. When we get to episode 2 and they're kidnapping Anakin's mom, I mean, interestingly enough, in certain ways, they are responsible for the Empire because they kidnapped Anakin's mom and everything that went down with all of that. And so they've always just been like gross, monster, horrible people. So then we team up with them. It's kind of interesting where you have Mando, and they teased it a little bit in the previous season with him doing the sign language, but him going all full blown, can communicate with them and humanizes them just a little bit in an interesting way. So then we have to team up to battle the creature that's out in the sand and in the cave. And there's another little tidbit in there where we learn that this creature ate the creature that the Sarlacc. Maybe the same Sarlacc, we don't really know specifically. There's hints at that. We'll get to that later. And so then, but it ate his Sarlacc, so it's even bigger than that. So we get to our big showdown in the episode, and they have to try a bunch of different stuff, try to blow it up, and then that doesn't work, and so they're running around chaotically, and then actually use their jetpacks, and we got 2 guys in Mandalorian armor flying around jetpacks, shooting at this worm creature. Mando decides to sacrifice himself. We, of course, know he's not going to die, but we're wondering how we get out of this. Apparently it barfs him up because of all of his radars. His Beskar armor keeps him safe. They blow it up, save the day. And even one of the things I even liked about this Timothy Olyphant sheriff character is that he's an honorable guy. He's like, all right, you saved the day. Here's your armor. I couldn't give it to you when I was trying to save the city. We've saved the city. You can have it. And I just like that about the character, that he's a sheriff. He's shoots raiders and shoots people, but he's an honorable guy that upholds things. And so hopefully he can show up back again in the show. But save the day. Mando takes off. Camera pans over, and there's a guy there. And when I guessed this, I assumed this was going to happen at the end of the episode. I didn't know how it was going to play out. I assumed this was going to be the final shot of the episode. But there's a guy there, and I start elbowing my son and elbowing my wife, and they're like, what? Oh, look, it's an old guy that's bald. I'm like, do you know the name of that actor? No. Do you know what he's from? No. So that's the actor from Aquaman. Oh, cool. What a weird part for him to take. No. Do you know what else he's from? No, I don't know what else he's from. Attack of the Clones. Oh, so that was Django. No. No. It wasn't Django. Django got his head cut off. You don't survive that one. You don't glue your head back on. Who else is a clone? Boba Fett. Wait. And at the end of the episode, it doesn't fully say that Boba Fett survived. But when you put the timeline, the pieces together, it kind of makes sense. Because you think about it, as far as we know, there's not a big amount of time that passes in Return of the Jedi. Seems like it moves pretty quickly. Boba at the beginning falls in Sarlacc pit. Then the Battle of Endor. Right after the Battle of Endor, they haven't finished celebrating. Shootout happens. Couple day happens of Timothy Olyphant walking into the desert. So not a lot of time has passed between him getting picked up by the Jawas and Boba Fett being eaten. We don't know the exact amount of time, but it's not a ton of time. But so it seems like Boba Fett crawled out, took his armor off, threw up his hands like, I guess I'm going to do something different with my life. And so then he's wandering in this desert to us now seeing him, 5-6 years, because that would be 6 years after the events of Return of the Jedi. I believe 1 year's passed since the beginning of season 1 of Mandalorian. I guess we don't know because we don't know how much time happened between seasons, but season 1 took place over a good bit of time. So we see this image of him returning. And I don't know if they're going to do anything with that. I really hope that that the actor Morrison, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, Temuera Morrison. I always I don't know how to pronounce his first name. I really hope that he returns as Rex. That's really what I would like to see. As a little tease of Boba Fett, I don't need a Boba Fett adventure since he's not really a Mandalorian and he's given up his armor, but like the tease, that's a nice tease. But Rex being a clone would look exactly the same as him. And supposedly they've fully confirmed Rex was at the Battle of Endor. So you have Rex show up in this season. That's a lot of fun. That would be really cool if they did that. So in general, it's more of what I liked, these kind of Westerns in the world of Star Wars, great casting, backstory filling out the Star Wars universe, Easter egg teases and things like that I really enjoyed. As I mentioned at the beginning, a few things had me nervous. Let's move on to the bad. So as we kind of move into the bad, I'll nitpick one thing. There's a boxing fight at the beginning of it, and it's like an actual normal boxing ring with like ropes around it and everything. And it seemed awfully earthly for the Star Wars universe. They normally find something that's just interesting enough to be a little bit different. That's nitpicking. Who cares about that? So where I start to get a little bit nervous is kind of three things, and they all are in the same ballpark for me. There's a lot of familiar in this episode. It feels like a very safe, familiar episode that we go to a new place at the beginning of the episode. And then where do we go? Tatooine. We're back to Tatooine. And it's like, we have the whole Star Wars universe to explore and we go to Tatooine. Why are we back on Tatooine? Why are we back at a sand planet? Why are we back somewhere with Jawas and Raiders? Like, why are we back at the same thing again? And Tatooine seems to be the middle of nowhere. There's Nowheresville that is also the center of the Star Wars universe. But at the same time, like doing it in episode 1, like we had a 10-month gap since our last episode. What's the very first thing when we return? We go to Tatooine. That's frustrating to me. Like if this was episode 4, I don't know that it would stand out to me so much. I would complain we went back to Tatooine, I think, no matter what. But the first episode, we're going back to a planet that we've seen before. That's frustrating to me. Like, go somewhere else. Stop keeping the universe this size. Go bigger. Second one, inherently, when you go to Tatooine and like, look, Boba Fett's armor. Look, Boba Fett survived. It's getting pretty fan servicey, borderline fan fictiony when you actually have him like, hey guys, hey, waving at the camera at the end. Okay, he doesn't fully wave, but you get my point. Like that's that's hyper fan service when you're doing that level of stuff, as he's a fan favorite that died over 35 years ago in film. So once again, familiar, safe, and universe is small. We got the whole universe to explore. We're back to Tatooine. I know where a Mandalorian is. Go to this village. He goes to the village, and it's the Mandalorian that we know the best besides Mando. though. Boba Fett, I don't think, follows the creed of the Mandalorian, so I don't think we should call him a Mandalorian. He just has the armor. So, very small universe once again. And then kind of third issue, not the small universe, but the familiar. There's like 2 repeated plot points from season 1 in this episode. He shows up to a village and, well, first off, they repeat going back to Tatooine, so that lady shows up. So that feels a lot like the episode The Gunslinger. Then we get to the village where we're going and we discover that it's being attacked by something. So the whole village needs to band together to battle the thing. It feels a lot like episode 4 of season 1. And then the other one on it is that we have to go to and battle a creature that's in a cave, and we can't do it alone, which feels a lot like episode 2 of The Mandalorian, where he's trying to get the egg. And then it's even, I think the Raiders seem to pull an egg out at the end, so they're excited about an egg, which once again feels like episode 2 of the show. And so those don't make me not like the episode, but it does make me go, that's a lot of familiar in an episode that, we're in episode 9 of the show overall, season 2, and we're back to Tatooine and we're borrowing plot points, major plot points from episode 1. Those are kind of warning signs to me. I enjoyed the episode, obviously. I mean, I had a ton of fun with it, but I'm going, oh, this is going to get really stale if we keep this up. And I talked about it also a lot, and kind of as a fourth one in there for some people. A lot. I talked about this earlier, but that it is an inconsequential episode towards the overall arc. So we repeated the plot line of 2 episodes, went to a planet that we've been before, did a bunch of fan service for a side quest. It's not the main quest. It's a side quest that doesn't add to the overall narrative. So that makes me go, that's weird. That's weird to do for episode 1. I know that's part of the way the show works. Why wouldn't you do that episode 3? Why wouldn't you give us episode 1 really moves things forward, really sets things in motion, and we understand how this season is different and how they're being chased by these people. What was going on with the dark? Give us something that ties in that big overall arcing narrative, and then episode 3 be like, let's calm down. Side quests again. This is what this show is like. It's a lot like a video game that you got your main story that you're doing, but they also offer these side quests you could go on. A Mandalorian video game would be pretty fun. I'm just throwing that one out there. So, yeah, that's kind of my take on it. Very excited for next week. I hope we go somewhere new and they progress the meta story, the overall arc of the season, and don't do another side quest and don't take us back somewhere we've been before. I don't normally score individual episodes of television, but we'll just go, it's a solid single thumb up. We don't get a second thumb in the mix. We just get one thumb, giving it a thumbs up. Very solid entertainment, but it did play it safe, lean into the familiar, and have a lot of fan service in there without progressing the narrative forward. So solid episode, familiar. Hopefully next week that they can move away from some of this. Let me know what you thought down below in the comment section. Spoil away if you want to. If you want to hear my thoughts on the individual episodes of season 1, check out that video right over there. And thank you so much for watching.